figure out early on what animates you, not what excites other people, and pursue those things. That's what will bring the most joy to you. That's what will allow you to develop the most meaningful relationships and will save you a lot of angst when, you're competing for some prize that you don't care about and you end up not getting it.
Hello and welcome to all our listeners to another fabulous episode of EDU Unlocked with me, your host, Ashish Fernando. And this podcast is not about the typical, oh, how are institutions growing their programs and growing their enrollment? This is about leaders, about inspiring people who are not just impacting their own institutions, but they're also impacting education and higher ed as a whole, as an ecosystem. And joining us today is one such amazing guest, Kavitha Bindra, who's the Assistant Dean and Executive Director of Executive Education at the Yale School of Management. Kavitha, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation to come.
Fabulous. I'd like to give our listeners a little bit of an intro before we get started. And so, for everybody who I'm sure a lot of you already know Kavita, but for those of you who don't, she joined the Yale School of Management in this role, and she's overseeing about $25 million worth of portfolio, and she's leading initiatives in the exec ed side of things. I'm really curious to talk to you a little bit about that, right? Because even I personally am considering executive education at a top school, just having run a business for 5 years, and so really looking forward to that. And you've been doing that now for quite a few years, right?
Yeah, I just exceeded my 5 year tenure mark. So, it's been a really amazing 5+ years overseeing this department. If you do the math, you'll realize I joined the team in October 2019, which was immediately prior to the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And we had some unexpected challenges thrown at us by that whole scenario, but it's been quite a ride over
So
these
you
past
you
five
you
years.
expected to join Yale and like go meet everybody, learn the system, and then you were told, yeah, we're doing all of this from home, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was lucky enough to have been at the Yale School of Management and other roles prior to joining executive education. But yeah, the traditional script that you follow as a new leader in a new area is,
Mm.
that you do a listening tour, that you really get immersed in how things are done before you make any changes or introduce new ideas. And, that process was really truncated for me. And,
Yeah.
we really had to, I think, pivot pretty quickly to address, I think this really disruptive, but opportunistic, uh,
What
pandemic.
gave rise to this idea of joining Yale? Was it your time at Yale? You did your MBA there, right? Or was
Right.
it like seeded in you before that itself that you want to be in higher ed, you want to work for a school like Yale?
Yeah, I think I've always in the back of my head known that I would work in education in some way. I was, from an immigrant family. I'm an immigrant myself, and my family always viewed education as the great transformative force for people. And it was really a means for social mobility and just gaining a foothold in the community that we were joining. So my family always really valued education. They instilled that in me. I think I assumed I would join the academy in some way, and that led to me thinking about pursuing a PhD or being a scholar. I quickly realized my talents didn't lie in that area, but that I was a strong manager and leader, administrator, strategist, and those are all qualities I think higher ed can really use more of. And I realized that was a way I could really make an impact in this sector. So I'm a reformed management consultant. I spent many years of my career in management consulting.
Yeah,
I then worked in the healthcare sector at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, had a number of different roles there. And ultimately, I was lucky enough to return to my alma mater, the Yale School of Management, where I did my MBA.
fabulous. Yeah.
So I think it was really a confluence of always having a strong interest in education and higher education and recognizing how I could really be a strong contributor in that way.
Fabulous. Yeah, not the typical I tell my story a lot. I'm born to brown parents in India,
Right.
and you have to be an engineer or a doctor.
Right, right.
And yeah, I did not. I took a completely different route, but ended up in technology. But yeah, it's interesting to learn stories of people with some sort of that background. You said you're an immigrant. I'm assuming from the Indian subcontinent
Yeah,
ish.
actually, my parents are from India, but I was born in New Zealand
Oh,
and,
wow.
um, and lived in the UK for a while before coming to the US. So of the Indian diaspora, but not directly from India.
But experienced a lot of other continents before coming here, I'm
Right.
guessing. Yeah,
Yes.
wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty interesting.
Uh,
Now and before Yale, you were at Wellesley, and I was reading, as just when I was researching about you and the questions I want to ask
mhm,
you. One of the things that showed up was I read on the Wellesley effect. There was a quote from you that Wellesley made you the woman you are, and that was
mhm.
pretty interesting. That it was like, and they put it like big and bold. So, so I was wondering what effect that has had on you, because that's just prior to your studies at Yale, right?
Yeah, Wellesley was a really transformative experience for me. You know, I I went to a public middle school and high school in Burlington, Vermont. So
Oh, wow. Yeah.
small, relatively small community, um, not super diverse.
Yeah.
Wonderful place to grow up, but coming from the background that I had and living in that community, I sort of felt like I needed a more global sort of outlook, wherever I went to college. And so I was lucky enough to go to Wellesley, and be surrounded by women, amazing women from all over the world. And I had amazing professors throughout my time there, but I really learned so much from my classmates. And, I think what was really great about the experience was, as much as I love my male colleagues and my male classmates from my MBA program, I think removing them from the academic experience, at least among my fellow classmates, I had male faculty teaching me at Wellesley. You sort of there's an expectation that everybody contributes, and you don't have the pressure of the gender dynamics in the classroom.
Mm,
And so it was just an expectation that
interesting
you
take. Yeah.
contribute, that everybody has something to say. Um, you're expected to step into leadership roles. And I think that expectation, and the environment that really allows you to do that, um, sort of set me up for success, both in my MBA program at the time. This has changed, but at the time, my class was 25% women at the Yale School of Management. And I have a very vivid recollection of the first few months being one of the only women who would speak up in class. And it was just
Mm,
conditioned in me to do that. And it just wasn't the case in a predominantly male environment, entering that. Um, that setting. So, I think it really helped me just sort of assume that, my voice is important, my contributions are important, and it's really important to step into these leadership roles regardless of whatever dynamics exist. And, I had the skill set to do that going into both the workplace and my MBA following Wellesley.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I was just trying to make some assumptions and r run a search right now. I was trying to find if, and I'm pretty sure if we have the stats, it'll show it that a school like Wellesley probably provides or creates more women leaders in the corporate world or any like enterprise arena than most other co-ed schools because of just the way it's set up and it's empowering women to get up and do things in those roles. I think, yeah, I'd love to see some stats. I was just Googling. I couldn't
Yeah,
find
I think
much, but
that's
yeah.
right. I this is an old article, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's still true. But the year I started at Wellesley, which was, I'm dating myself, was in the fall of 95. Um, there was an article, I believe it was in the New York Times, but one of the big publications that said "Want to succeed." The headline was "Want to succeed, go to Wellesley,"
Hmm.
and it was essentially about how the Wellesley Economics Department had produced all of these top investment banker women coming into investment banking, going into top leadership roles, and sort of extrapolating that to success in other sectors. And so, I was really excited about the timing of that article because I think it convinced my parents that it was a good place for
That
me
was
to
good.
go
Yeah,
to. But
pretty
um,
awesome.
but I do think those general themes laid out in that article probably persist to this day.
That's pretty amazing. I mean, this is I'm sure there are stories around how you landed from New Zealand to UK and then Burlington, Vermont. Like
Right.
that's not typically where people would go and land. But yeah, I lived in Boston, so I'm very familiar with the New England area, and it's a great place to study. It's a great place to learn, meet intellectual people,
Absolutely.
and get out there. This is amazing. Throughout that journey, is there, just kind of exploring the things you've explored and like, yeah, I'll go to Wellesley and study in a girls' college. And is there one thought or one value that you carry with you that you'd like to tell our listeners in terms of, or maybe, something maybe to do with women, gender, I don't know, but something that you've learned and experienced that you'd like for others to know?
I think it's important for everybody to figure out, I think, relatively early in their careers, whether it's in college or during college, or a little bit later, but really figure out what animates you and what motivates you, um, and seek that out in any organization you join. So whether that's a volunteer organization or a graduate program or, some sort of civic organization. And for me, that animating force has always been mission orientation, ability to have an impact. Um, I'm personally less motivated by profit, but maybe that is what motivates someone else. Uh, but for me, whatever I'm involved in or want to give my time to has to have both impact and mission orientation. And,
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, and, I think Wellesley, for example, their motto is it's I'll get the Latin wrong, so I won't say it, but it's not to be served, but to serve others, non ministari sed ministari. Um, and similarly, the Yale School of Management is to educate leaders for business and society. And that's what attracted me to apply. That's what attracted me to return. Even working as a management consultant, I worked in the healthcare sector. And,
Mm.
so that was really what drew me to that particular type of work, and I learned so much working in that area. But I think having, you can have twists and turns and different things that you try, but I think really trying early on as a young person to uncover that animating force and, what motivates you can really be an important guidepost to the types of opportunities you pursue.
I love it. I love it. And even the way you start with like impact and mission, I think it's super important. A lot of times students are just going after a paycheck, right? I want
Right,
a paycheck and a title.
right,
And it gets old pretty quickly.
right,
Because at some point, yeah, you want to have that balance. You want to be associated with a mission because otherwise you're going to get bored doing your 9 to 5 in
right,
most cases remote right now. Yeah,
right.
pretty
And I
awesome.
do think, again, I certainly some people, their primary motivation is receiving recognition, or it may be the paycheck, as you say. And I think just being clear with yourself that that's what motivates you is really important. And maybe mission isn't the most critical thing for you.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
then you should probably prioritize career opportunities, or, say no to things that don't further enhancing your paycheck if that's what's most important to you. So
Yeah.
I do think really digging in and having the self-awareness early on in your career is really important. And,
Yeah.
I have a high school age daughter, you know, it's a little early for her to figure out what animates her, but I think that's an important thing for her to think about and start working towards in high school and as she gets into college.
That's pretty awesome. And coming to your job now and your role now, you're working with executives, you're helping them, figure out their journey with the next stage of education. What are some of the unique things I'm sure you encounter a lot of unique challenges because they've already gone through in most cases like an MBA program or learned a lot through the companies they've started and they're looking for that extra, right?
Right.
And so designing and creating programs for them, I'm sure comes with its own challenges. Being able to keep them attracted and satisfied and get a 5-star rating on your program is like it's close to impossible. So tell us a little bit about those challenges you're facing now.
Sure. I think we've all had that experience when you're in a training situation where it could be a fun social experience, or maybe there is some insight you gain from one lecture that you go to. But at the end of the day, you may have some nice afterglow from the experience, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really have a huge impact on the work that you do, or how you bring yourself to your job the next day. It's maybe more of a feel-good experience.
Yeah.
And given how much our partners, the organizations we partner with, invest in executive learning, we really think it's important that the impact lasts beyond, the time that they
Those
spend
few
at
weeks.
Yale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's really the challenge, is how do you, and it gets back to this question of impact. How do you really
Mhm.
create that long-lasting impact? Um, how do you measure that impact?
Mhm.
How do you really define what they're really looking for? I think sometimes in working with executives and, the organizations we partner with, they'll say we want them to achieve X, Y, Z. But at the end of the day, they're really looking for something different and something more impactful. And so our
Mm.
job is sometimes to tease that out and sort of introduce some other ideas and things for them to think about. And
Is it also for them about networking, just meeting people in the same field? Like that's like if I would think of going to a Yale or a Harvard to do an exec ed program, I think one of the number one things for me would be, can I meet like-minded people who are maybe in my industry and I can just create those connections because then they'll probably last a lifetime and help me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's a really critical draw for the programs. And so we have to be able to create something that's attractive to a group of people that you would want to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Just building that cohort,
right,
right? It
right.
must be a
Building the
challenge. Yeah.
cohort, creating opportunities for peer-to-peer learning, not and networking. And you want to be able to do that while still showing that you're more than just a convener, that you're also providing content. I think that those are challenges that are different from sort of a traditional degree program.
Yeah.
That, uh, you know, the faculty we bring into our programs to teach and the content we teach um, has to also provide opportunities for peer-to-peer learning and interaction. We're dealing with experienced adult learners, so they're not really used to being sort of in a classroom for hours at a time, absorbing
Mhm.
information. So we
Yeah.
have to work with our faculty to teach differently, to provide more active learning opportunities, more group engagement. So there is that opportunity for team to team, peer-to-peer learning. So, it's sort of a shift for our faculty as well. And we spend a
Oh, I'm
lot of
sure.
time educating them on how our learners learn and how they
Yeah.
need to interact with each other and with the faculty.
Yeah, absolutely. I cannot even start to imagine those teaching challenges, right? Because for most people who are in those roles, it's like even 5 minutes of non-engaging content is like they're tuned out because they're
Right.
used to thinking that way. As I'm focused on the next thing I wanna do. That's great. So what's in this role then? What's the one skill set that is a must have when you're dealing with executive education, people at that level? And an institution of this caliber? Like, what's that one skill set?
I really think it's stakeholder management. I,
I
I
would have
know
guessed. Yeah.
that sounds like consulting speak, but you're really dealing with a whole set of stakeholders that are very different from sort of the traditional higher ed ecosystem. So you have non-degree learners. They're also experienced learners. You have faculty that you engage with. Um, we're also revenue generating for Yale. So that adds sort of a dimension.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as you noted, we are recruiting individual learners into our programs, but we also develop what we call custom programs, where we work directly with organizations to develop programs for them. And so, sort of
Yeah.
managing those business relationships outside of the higher ed ecosystem. So, you sort of have to have you know, unfortunately, I only have 2 feet, but you have to have those feet in multiple
Multiple places, I'm sure.
areas at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And I'm
So,
assuming even the companies you're dealing with enterprises and you're dealing with leadership at those enterprises and
exactly,
understanding their needs, motivations, understanding the leadership at Yale and what they expect of you, and then the learner. Yeah, that's like,
exactly.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then you have faculty who, at Yale especially, are really involved in the governance of exec ed and all learning that happens at Yale and the School of Management. So it's a lot.
yeah.
But so I would say
Would you
someone,
say it's not for the faint-hearted?
there's so much joy in this work and this role. So I would say rather not so much it's not for the faint-hearted, but it's for someone who understands complexity and is comfortable with that and
Mm,
comfortable with complexity, ambiguity, agility, and the ability to sort of have different perspectives in mind at the same
yeah.
time.
Yeah, and cultural context and communication
Right,
skills
right, right,
goes
right.
on and yeah,
Exactly.
but I'm sure I mean your background in business and then you studied English and so all of that kind of just put together it becomes a great package for your skill sets for this role. That's awesome. Good to know.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice then for well you've told us what's the skill set needed and all of that for people who are looking to, come work for a school like Yale, and there's thousands of people in the higher ed ecosystem who are like, oh, I'd love to work for Yale. In fact, the person who got me admitted to Bentley, I think you might probably know her,
Yes.
Chris. Yeah. Kristen Mercury. So she was at Bentley when she gave me my offer. I got 100% scholarship, and so I didn't go to
Oh,
Yale.
great.
I went to Bentley.
Hmm.
And then she's like, "Oh, I'm going to Yale now." So, uh, so it's a lot of people aspire to work for a school like that, right? What's the differentiator that kind of Yale would look for, that that makes you stand out than the others?
Yeah, I think it's all of those qualities that I
You've
described,
already hinted on, yeah,
uh, but I think one piece of advice, and I talk to a lot of people who are interested in A, moving into higher education, but B, into Yale specifically. And what I say to them is, and this is what I did, you may have to consider taking a step backwards in terms of scope of responsibility and, just salary, obviously,
yeah,
and mainly because I think like many organizations, it's hard to break into it if you don't understand it and you don't understand the culture. And so coming into a higher level can be challenging if you're coming from the outside. So, especially if you're coming from outside of higher education. So, for me, I was coming from a fairly um, high level roles at Sloan Kettering in healthcare. And I found it pretty humbling when I was looking for roles in higher education
mm,
to see that, my experience in healthcare and consulting was valued, but not so, but the fact that I didn't have a background in higher education sort of
made it
seemed
a
to
little different.
preclude me from going into those senior roles right away. And so I took a more junior, I would call maybe more routinized role in
Mm,
admissions, but it was completely valuable because from that vantage point, I really got to understand how higher education works. Um, it really helped me, I think develop this talent management interests that I had, from that recruiting angle. I built relationships with people from all over the world and recruiting the class into it, the admissions group. From that role, I was able to then add additional value by helping to create some systems and processes in that role that didn't exist. And I think slowly using that position, I was able to really demonstrate skill sets and other things that I could do and sort of kept moving forward at the School of Management. I was fortunate to land here because the school is really great at cultivating talent among the people that
mm.
they hire. And I was promoted several times, culminating in this last position or the current position that I'm in. So I think if you're trying to break into higher education from outside and a place like Yale that has a very unique culture and way of doing things, you may sometimes have to take a step back at first, but that will pay off, I think, in the long term
Yeah,
once
yeah,
you're in.
but you have to be bold enough to bite your teeth and kind of
Right.
yeah, be able to do those kind of things. That's very helpful. And actually it goes on to actually talk about how mature Yale is as an organization of hiring.
Hmm.
right? Because you'll see like most mature organizations actually rely on talent from within
Hmm.
to actually take positions of higher order, because then you already know the ecosystem. So like
Hmm.
rather than hiring from outside. So yeah, and I've seen this at some of the other schools as well when I've talked to leadership there is, yeah, we rather prefer scaling somebody up from within if there is a possibility than actually hire a person from outside
Right,
to
right,
lead a team of people at Yale that they have no idea, or any larger school, no idea of how we've actually run for the past so many years.
right,
So it's a really valuable point.
right. And because it's such a old institute, I mean, relatively old for the US, but
Yeah.
um, and mission oriented, I think being really tied to the mission of Yale and is really important if you want to come into this organization. And I think that's likely true of most higher ed institutions, really being um, attuned to what that particular school represents, the history, the traditions, and being able to preserve that while also helping to bring the school into the future and being able to talk about that is really important.
Wow. Does it feel proud to be when you wear a Yale sweatshirt, you're not just wearing it because you studied there, but you also work there? Like there's a double
Absolutely.
proud.
Absolutely. I
That's very
mean,
sensible.
and I don't know if you've ever been to New Haven, but Yale is
Yeah.
sort of built into the city,
City, yeah,
and
yeah, I've seen it.
it's sometimes I just walk around and you're among these storied buildings on campus. You're just walking to your car or going out to dinner,
Yeah,
and you know even now, 13 years later, um, I just sort of pinch myself sometimes and think, wow, I can't believe I work at
you
this
did this. Yeah.
institution.
Yeah, good
So
for you. I mean, congratulations for all that you've done it
thank you.
here. If you were to take a pause and choose a completely different career path, let's say everything was open, is there something you would do, like if not this? Assuming, I know you love this role and everything, but maybe there was
Yeah, if I could go back, I do love what I do and I love working in higher education, but I've always sort of had a strong interest in like writing for TV shows.
Oh wow, okay.
And I just like some of
Interesting.
my I just whenever I watch a really exciting new show, and I think we're really in the golden age of television.
Oh, absolutely.
Um, you know, some of the writing and is just so astounding to me, and just the thought of being in a writer's room or thinking through how something comes together. I think that would be really fun and really animating. And so,
Love it.
something like that, some creative endeavor like that would be really
Love it. I mean, just
exciting.
talking to you and from the education you've had, I'm sure you love writing, and that's why it's that thought is there. And yeah, I've like I was watching some of those videos of when they actually do the readout just before
Hmm.
an episode, and the actors actually are so involved that when they read something that they're not expecting, they actually like break down like in the
Right, right.
pretty interesting, right? How they
Yeah,
get into character so
right.
much that it's yeah, okay, that's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
Um what's we talked about skills. Yeah, what's the one thing you do to wind down after a crazy day at work at Yale?
I've discovered uh, what an impact exercise has on mental health in the last few years. So I've really gotten into strength training. Um, I love being in the gym and lifting really heavy weights.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, so
Good.
I mean, I don't claim to be, at the top of my game there yet, but that's been really fun to just sort of blow off steam by being in the gym. And I go to a wonderful gym here in New Haven, and my the trainer who I worked with referred to me as an athlete the other day, and I was like, "Wow, I've never thought of myself as an athlete." And she was like, you absolutely are." And so I think
That's
thinking
awesome.
about that and doing that has been such
Yeah,
a wonderful,
I can
just way
feel
to
that.
move. And so,
Yeah, I love it. I love lifting too.
yeah.
Yeah, so I used to try and do it in the evenings because I start my phone calls at 8 a.m.
Hmm.
But then I was like, that's not working. I need to somehow put my gym hours early in the morning. So now I
Right.
wake up at like 5 and hit the
Oh,
gym.
wow. Good for
And
you. I have not managed to do that quite yet. I'm
yeah.
still like a post work,
Yeah, yeah, but
yeah,
it
gym
does a
person.
lot for you just, yeah, I totally understand where that's coming from. It's like a great vent for all the work, the time your brain has spent working, you just like lift and do some gym. I love it.
Right,
Awesome.
right.
Any piece of advice you would give to your younger self? Let's say rewind 15.
Oh, yeah. And this may resonate with you in particular, but I think um a lot of immigrant kids and especially from the South Asian diaspora, I think there's a lot of pressure to buy into an achievement culture
You
and
said it. Yeah.
and to rack up different accolades and
Yeah.
prizes and external validation of your achievements. And so I think I spent a lot of time early on sort of chasing those.
Check boxes. Yeah.
Right, right. And I think the advice I would give is exactly what I've said already, which is figure out early on what animates you, not what excites other people, and pursue those things. And that's what will bring the most joy to you. That's what will allow you to develop the most meaningful relationships and will save you a lot of angst when, you're competing for some prize that you don't care about and you end up not getting it.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
So,
Yeah. I can fully resonate with that. Like
yeah.
I did a double master's because my
Mhm.
family was all about education. Like my grandfather started 7 schools and like all of that stuff. And yeah, I remember when I got a gold medal in my master's in biotech and my mother was like, okay, now that's done, right? What's next? Let's talk about
Right.
what's next. I'm like, whoa, can we like celebrate this a little bit? No,
Right.
it's just one after the other piling of achievements and you gotta be the best. Second best is
Right.
nothing. So I totally agree with what you're saying. It's hard at that age though, right, to kind of say, yeah, validation is what I think is validation and not what
Right.
what society and my parents and elders think is validation. So
Right. Right.
very interesting thing. But yeah, it definitely will save a lot of stress for a lot of people, especially from our side of the world.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Awesome. What's Okay, who is there a person or a book or um, somebody or something that's had an influence in your life, in your career? I mean, you're an achiever. You went to Yale. It's like 2% acceptance rate or whatever, and you studied at such a great school, traveled so much. Um, is there an influence outside of parents and the network, like a book, a person who's mentored you?
Oh, there's so many amazing mentors that I've had, and I could easily talk about each of them for the next hour. But I'll just call out one person I think had a lot of recent impact on me. And this is a fellow Yale School of Management alum named Mark Friedman. So Mark and I are working on a program together called the Experience Leaders Initiative. It's launching next week.
Wow.
It's a learning program focused on what I would call third act learners. So people who've sort of left their sort of primary career path, um, you know, age-wise, maybe in their 50s or 60s, but it could be earlier, and are really thinking about ways that they can continue to be, um, contributing to their communities, think about impacts that they can have in the world. And Mark is a real thought leader when it comes to midlife transitions. He's written a number of books in this area. He's a social entrepreneur in this space. And, I think working with him has really gotten me thinking about, how do you think about your life in terms of chapters? And, he's helped me really think about, I'm now in my late 40s. You're sort of told by society that this is when things start going downhill. Um, but, he's really given me a new perspective on how I can make the next several chapters of my life the best
Hmm.
chapters and the most productive chapters. And, I think he's really changed my point of view or helped me evolve my point of view around thinking about how higher ed can be about lifelong learning rather than learning concentrated on the young. So I really credit Mark with all of that. And
Love that.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's just been a wonderful friend and mentor to me in that way.
Amazing, amazing. And that just goes to highlight, every time I ask one of our guests who are all successful in their roles, and there's always a person, there's always a mentor, and just goes to talk about the value of having mentorship and advice, because even the people who kind of have learned a lot in life and they're the know-it-all people still need somebody to look from a lens outside to say, hey,
Yeah,
maybe this is, kind of where you want to go. And I feel like you're sensing that in Mark, and that's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, very good. Awesome. Anything for looks like you're actually looking forward to the future for all the things that are coming and the program you're launching. Anything well, I'm sure the answer to this is the program that you're launching, but I was going to ask, is there anything you're looking forward to in the next like 5 years or so as kind of
Yeah.
the next stepping stone? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I executive education generally, I think, is going to into an inflection point.
Hmm.
Mainly because I think higher education generally is changing. And, it's partially due to demographic shifts. It's due to the lack of affordability of degree programs. It's due to growing mistrust in the general population around higher education. And I think there are a lot of questions about relevancy of higher education, especially when it comes to, how do you grapple with AI? How do you grapple with these
Sure.
big geopolitical issues? All sorts of things, all sorts of forces. And, you know, I I actually think higher ed is going to be completely disrupted as um, degrees themselves become less valuable in the marketplace. And will be shifting more to a lifelong learning model.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I sort of think that people are going to be, rather than coming into college, getting a degree, and then going to work, and that's it, or, maybe you come back to grad school and that's it. Um, I think people are going to be coming in and out of higher education throughout their careers, whether it's to get some basic grounding in something, to upskilling. I think there's a place for liberal arts education and all of that. Um, but I think executive education or continuing education or professional learning is really going to animate that shift to lifelong learning models. So
Love it. Yeah.
I I don't know how long that's going to take to unfold, but I'm excited to be a part of that shift. And that's what I really see happening, from this vantage point for the next 5 years.
I love it. And it completely resonates with me because, I've been working with some of our schools and customers on the whole concept of stackable skills,
Right,
right? That it doesn't have to be a full degree program that gives you a set of skills, but like you're taking a certificate course here from Yale, you're doing a little work experience there for 2 or 3 years. Everything's giving you a little bit of some skill set. And you
right,
should be able to validate it, put it on a document that's not self-validated, but there's an entity that says, yeah, we've tested for these skills and you do have these skills. It doesn't matter what avenue it comes from, whether it comes from traditional ed or something else,
right,
and just be able to stack skills as you move forward and progress in your life. I just it really like appeals to me in terms of how we're going to learn in the future, like especially with like we're like in internet 3.0, like so much is available at the click of a button. Like people are
right.
now learning from ChatGPT, right?
Hmm.
So it's like even we as employers have shifted even how we interview. Like I was on an interview the other day, and we were running a case study, and the candidate said, "Hey, can I use ChatGPT though? Because this kind of stuff I'm never going to do on my own." And so we're
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, use it, right? Use it. Why not? It's a
Right,
great resource, but." Let's see if you can use that and strategize. Just the way we're thinking and adopting to the new environment, it's pretty awesome. So yeah, I think
right,
it's a great point you make in terms of lifelong skills and the whole cradle to grave philosophy we
right,
talk
right,
about. Just keep adding skills till you hit your grave. Uh,
right. I'm going to be learning till the day I die. So
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And that's a high note for us to conclude on this podcast. Thank you so much, Kavitha, for being such a wonderful guest and giving us so much information.
thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Amazing. And thank you to all our listeners for joining another wonderful episode of EDU Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, your host, and our wonderful guest for today, Kavitha Bindra from the Yale School of Management. Thank you, everybody.